I'm very glad people are starting to wake up and starting to go into hard assets because that's what it's all about. The original hard assets, and that's gold and silver. And people got to realize that it's not, us versus them, meaning Bitcoiners versus gold and silver stackers, is we're like a military or an army, and we're just different departments of that fighting against the fiat debasement. And it's good because I started, as many as you know, or Robin, I started with gold and silver. I sold it all for Bitcoin. But now that I look back and I still watch some of the gold and silver people that I used to watch before, they're very happy. In my personal opinion, not to poop on them or anything like that, but gold should be 10,000 an ounce and silver should be over 200 an ounce. But there's a lot of manipulation going on there. But I'm glad they're getting their time in the sun. They deserve it. And hopefully people will wake up when they see, that the dollar is losing value, the Dixie, and people's purchasing power is going down. They'll look and say, "Oh wow, what's a safe haven? Where should I put my money?" And they start looking into gold and silver because to me, all roads lead to Bitcoin. And gold and silver is kind of like, going to elementary school, learning about the fiat debasement, learning about the system that's broken, but then getting into Bitcoins like a doctorate or a graduate, you know, a very high level. So once they get into gold and silver and understand what the problem is, because that's the thing, they got to understand what the problem is. Then, like I said, all roads lead to Bitcoin.
Yeah, it also seems that like mainstream media is slowly waking up to the reality. I think JP Morgan it is that says there's a debasement trade going on with Bitcoin. Now inflation, like every single day, mainstream media, at least in Europe, but I guess the same thing is happening in America, where mainstream media is reporting on inflation and they're saying inflation is so bad. So I guess mainstream media is slowly waking up to the problem, even though they still say like, oh, greedy corporations, war and all of that, like not talking about the money, but at some point it's just, it is impendent, and that debasement is the real problem and not a symptom of debasement. And I'm really curious on how this will shake out when the mainstream gets what the real problem is and then wakes up to the reality. Oh, okay, they're just printing money, so they're devaluing it, and that's why I'm screwed. Oh, that's not good. So I don't know how this will shake out. Like at some point people have to wake up like, oh, I'm saving in fiat, and over the past 10, 15, 20 years, I got just completely screwed. That's kind of like a hard reality to swallow.
Yeah, and that's how I see it too. And it's funny, they are talking about it because I watch a lot of news and stuff like that. And not only are they talking about inflation, but they're actually, like you said, they're talking about debasement by printing. And everybody knows what the word inflation is. They just don't know what it is and the definition. And now people are starting to understand, like, oh my goodness. So inflation is not just prices going up. It's actually them printing more dollars and the supply of dollars chasing the same amount of goods, which brings the prices, quote unquote, up, and your value of your dollar is going down. And it's funny that you hear them saying the word fiat currency a lot. I didn't hear that 10 years ago. So it's kind of like becoming mainstream, even on the mainstream, they're talking about it. But again, when they're talking about, when they're showing gold and silver and Bitcoin, because again, Bitcoin now, and I'm seeing this a lot, and I said this on my channel, that a lot of people that are talking about gold, about 80% of the time, they bring up Bitcoin, which is good. And again, we have to pull back the layers and go nice and slow. But as long as people understand what the problem is and where it comes from, I think that's when people start slowly but surely getting into Bitcoin, and then it'll compound after that.
I just showed that we discovered that on the previous podcast that we did yesterday, basically. And I want to show you this because I found it so crazy. I've never heard about it, and the guest kind of gave me the idea that I should like try that out. And what I did is I searched the term with Google Trends, the term the debasement trade. This is the blue line that you see where there's like nothing really going on outside of like a few small here in March 2024, and basically right now where it spikes from 0 to like 6, which is nothing compared to what the general term debasement is now trading at, and it's not trading like, but looking at, it's not it's not a stock you can buy. It would be fun
Yeah.
being able to buy those things. But there you see the last 5 years, debasement was kind of on the same level. And all of a sudden now, the past couple of days, because JP Morgan and all those mainstream TradFi people pushed out debasement, it's all of a sudden hugely talked about. And I was like, okay, what is it like? How, not the past 5 years, how was it looking the last like 20 years? And Google allows for that here. And the past 20 years, it's been up also tremendously, but only one time before that. And I'm curious if you have any insights on that, but I haven't found any thing that was going on there. But in 2012, there was also a lot of talks. I know, like 2007, 8, the financial crisis, but 3 years later, all of a sudden, there was a lot of talk about the debasement. It's maybe also like Bitcoin in play, but back then Bitcoin was still a lot smaller, and now we're back up to like those big talks about debasement. What are you thinking about on that?
Yeah, it looks like to me, and I've never seen that chart. That's cool. It looks like when silver went up to, I believe, 50 bucks around that time, around 2011, when the brother, I forget what the brothers are named. They bought a bunch of silver and stuff like that, and gold and silver went up big time on that. And it was the silver squeeze, the original silver squeeze. So that might be that. But I think now in today's situation, it's almost like when we talk about Bitcoin, where we talking about gradually then suddenly. You know what I mean? It just goes up. And again, the fiat currency will die. And I know that the stable coins, because Trump wants to keep the dollar alive, they're going to try to stable out the dollar with that and things like that. But like the gold and silver bugs want, and I don't want the dollar to die, because it's going to be a lot of pain for everybody. But like the gold and silver stackers will say, that the end of the fiat currency is coming, and doomsday is coming, and all this other stuff. So when you see the debasement going like that, again, we're at almost 38 trillion in debt, and it's not going to slow down, and the money printer is going to go crazy. We'll probably talk about that later. And then, of course, the interest rates are going to get lowered. And again, you can kick the can down the road for so long. And that's what I think was happening. And once you do that, you got to get to the end of the cliff. And I'm not saying it is at the end of the cliff, but it's got to be getting close. Nobody knows. And again, I think the stable coins will help the dollar for a little bit. But at the end of the day, like I said, all roads lead to Bitcoin. And you know, people are waking up to this, and they're seeing it. They're feeling the pain. You know what I mean? This is like back in the 70s and 80s. Now they'll try to blame it on Trump or Biden or whatever, but red and blue, they both print money. They both overspend. And again, in the U.S. In particular, the government is the problem. And I tell people all the time, this is why you have to pay attention to politics. It all starts with politics. And when your government's too big and they spend too much, that's a big problem. That's where the debasement comes in.
It's actually an interesting question of like how much as Bitcoiners do we still have to kind of look at politics, because we think like we have always this talk of we are Bitcoiners, like Bitcoin is untouchable, and like if we have Bitcoin we are free. How much do we still have to care about what politics are actually doing?
In my humble personal opinion, I think we have to look at it a lot. I mean, the reason why Bitcoin is here today is because of what? Is because the dollar is being debased and they print too much. It started in, 2008. Everybody knows what happened. And then obviously 1971, we were taking off the gold standard. And before that, in 1933, they did it. They debased your gold or your currency or your energy by 40% when they did the executive order 6102. Believe gold was $20.62 in 1933, and then they repriced it at like 34, 35 the next year, 1934. And now today, and then what happened in the late 70s and 80s when Paul Volcker had to raise the interest rate to keep the inflation down, they can't do that today. So they're stuck between a rock and a hard place. And this all has to do with politics, because whoever's in office, red or blue, they all spend money. And when they debase your currency, the fiat currency that you're forced to use, because you are forced to use it, they don't give you a choice. If you don't pay your taxes, you can go to jail for that. or get, whatever, in some countries or whatever, and get bad credit. You can get your house taken if you don't pay your taxes on your house and stuff like that. But everything in our world is political now, especially today. And in particular, when President Trump came down that escalator 10 years ago in 2015, that changed politics. It ain't about red and blue anymore. You know what I mean? The Democrat Party has gone very, very far left, and the MAGA portion of the party, or the Republican Party, is kind of like um, a moderate, little bit to the right party. They'll call it a far right or whatever. But the media, the conglomerate, a lot of people, higher ups that are controlling things, just don't like Trump and anything he stands for. And for me, I always tell people a conservative today is just a common sense person, in my personal opinion. So politics are a big deal with Bitcoin, because again, that's where it comes from. When you look at the US debt clock and you see, the four line items we spend on Medicare and Medicaid and social security, and then we have the military, and then you have the interest on the debt. Again, that is all politics, and that's being legislated by the House and the Senate. And when you have a deficit, and you're running a deficit like we are, of about 2 trillion, as of this accord is like 1.9 trillion, meaning we spend 7.4 trillion and we make 5.5 trillion. And that's a big deficit. Again, that comes from the top. So I tell people all the time, just pay attention to what's going on. And I'm not saying you have to be, a political pundit and stuff like that. But if you want to know what's going on with Bitcoin, again, with the Strategic Bitcoin Reserve and the Bitcoin Act, which hasn't come yet, we still haven't had an audit on the what we have. Those things are important. So definitely pay attention to politics, no doubt.
I'm also curious on what the political reaction worldwide will be once Bitcoin hits certain milestones. The first milestone I'm really looking forward to is when Bitcoin will be more worth than any other asset. Speak flipping in gold. This will be huge. This probably will also coincide with Bitcoin hitting $1 million, somewhere along those lines. Like it probably probably will happen maybe a little bit above 1 million, because gold will also go up in that time frame. So it's hard to predict exactly when, but those two events I'm really looking forward to, and I think those will be maybe even in the same year. And I'm curious on like what will be the political reaction towards that. And I can only imagine two main things happening. If the one political reaction of like, oh, we have to buy as much as possible from that, because obviously it's not stoppable. It has been coming a long way, and it's probably there for like 20 years at that point. And then the other reaction is like, oh, we don't want to lose control of our fiat currencies. We have to ban this thing. I mean, this has been the reaction since so long from certain countries. But how do you look at that? Like, what do you realistically think that like the political reaction towards Bitcoin will be once it is so big that it is the biggest asset in the world? Like all those arguments of like being bad for the environment and like it being a bubble or anything, like those arguments are out of the window at that point, because like too many people hold it. I would assume.
Yeah. Well, about politics, it's a lot of the medias are controlled by the political entities. Like in America, we have, cable networks like MSNBC and CNN. You got your left wing stuff. And then on the regular channels, you got ABC, CBS, NBC. They're all left wing. And the Democrat Party, and I always say, Bitcoin is for everyone. It's not just for Republicans or conservatives or libertarians or independents or whatever. It's for everybody. But like I said, the left has gone so far. I'm trying to bring the left part wing of the party back towards the center, so we can have some common sense. Yeah, we might disagree with a few things, but we need to understand that just because you hate Trump, that doesn't mean there's no inflation and you're not paying a lot more at the gas pump or whatever. But when Bitcoin, and again, I like what you said about being the number one asset in the world. I think it's going to be a little bit before that. I think the game doesn't start until we hit 1 million. And that's when we're going to start talking about satoshis. And as you can see in my shirt here, this is all the world's money right here in the future. This is 2.1 quadrillion satoshis. 21 million Bitcoin, 2.1 quadrillion satoshis. And I think then CNBC, these financial channels, once we hit 1 million per Bitcoin, that's when they'll start measuring everything in satoshis per dollar. I use a certain app I use to buy satoshis, and I buy $1 an hour, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And the reason why I picked that, because I want to see what my dollar can get me. And as of this recording, it's like 800 and something satoshis per dollar. Once we get to a million price of Bitcoin, I think maybe on the side note, they'll may say Bitcoin's $1 million. But by then, that's when the game starts, by the way. They'll be talking about satoshis and how many satoshis you can get for $1. Meanwhile, in the background, as your per dollar, when it goes to $1 to 90 cents to 80 cents per dollar, how many satoshis you get per dollar. In the background, Bitcoin will be going up by hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars. So that's definitely going to affect politics. But if you really look at things and how it is with Bitcoin, especially being so scarce like it is on my shirt, it took us 16 years to get to 100,000 price of Bitcoin. 16 years. I ask people this all the time. How long do you think it's going to take us to get to 200,000? From 100,000 to 200,000, still the same thing. It's just another 100. You think it's going to take 16 years? 8 years? 4 years? 2 years? Less, right? So I believe, and again, we know it goes up and down. It's not going to be perfect, but every 100,000 is going to take less and less time. It's the ultimate compounding. So I think we're going to hit 1 million quicker than people think. I got it in Epoch 6, early Epoch 6, the first half of Epoch 6, 28, 29, 2028 or 2029. But every 100,000 is going to take longer. Now, again, we're going to have our bear markets and it's going to be different situations. But politically speaking, they're not going to be able to help but talk about this. They have no choice but to talk about it. They can disagree on this and that, and they can spend this here and spend that there. But at the end of the day, when Bitcoin hits 1 million, that's when the game starts. They're going to start measuring everything in satoshis, and nobody's going to be able to ignore it at that point.
Thank you for watching this video. This was only a snippet of the podcast. And if you want to watch the full episode and get all of the context of this episode, you can click right here or here. Oh, maybe also here.